All right, so we're a little bit late getting to the top 20 albums of January. Admittedly, I had a lot of stuff to work on. I had for second issue of Mystification Zine in a digital form to put out. We started a Patreon. We added a store. A lot going on here. A lot of that is gone over here. In the last month, I wrote 30 long form album reviews on the website. I recorded 37 video reviews, wrote 18 short album reviews, and covered about 36 releases in an exhaustive study of melodic black metal as we revive that column and redo it. Otherwise, I sent out 12 interviews with bands, and about 4 responded. That was very disappointing. Otherwise, the zine is available now. There's a link there. You know, that's just my way of putting in the work to try to make a little bit of extra money to keep things going on the site, to reimburse me for a little bit of the time that I spend on it, and to do something fun. I am going to have a lot more fun with this zine and its layout over time. So that's something I would like to get into and really have a lot more fun with over time. It was just sort of a rush to get it all done, and it didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted in every aspect, where I wanted a bigger feature and all that. So there's a lot in there. Otherwise, subscribe to YouTube. It helps a lot that we sort of kick towards 1,000 mark. Leave all the videos playing all the time and watch them 24/7, and that will help a lot in terms of just getting that out there. I mean, this type of music deserves to be pushed out there by somebody, and at least, you know, once in a while I know what I'm talking about. I think this month I definitely know what I'm talking about in terms of Sovereign's Altered Realities being the best record put out in January. This is a death metal band, and one in the style of the late 80s and early 90s, kind of death to thrash metal transition. And this is an Oslo, Norway-based group of very talented fellows who I review for the latest issue of the zine. So, great record overall. I think it's just full of riffs. That's clear enough if you've listened to a single song on this thing. I think what surprised me about this record is that it is fully indulgent in the riff. It creates its own unique atmosphere that it goes for, and there's no real clunker. There's no like big sloppy experiment on this record. They just really hit the kind of the classic death metal or death thrash metal of the late 80s sound, and they go with it. So if you're a fan of like Sepultura's Arise, or even just Obliteration or Necromantian, there's a lot that you're going to like about this record, and it comes in a very classic form, which is just basically flawless. The more I listen to it and I sit with the album art, I even bought the t-shirt and all that whenever that's going to show up. So couldn't be more enthusiastic about this record, and I think it's going to be one of the best of the year so far.
For destruction,
Number 2 in January is Procol Hiss from Drowned, and this is a long time coming. The last record these guys released was Idola Spicus, and that was back in 2014. And now a lot has changed since then, but the high quality that they aim for, the old school death metal that they produce, and the death doom metal sounds that they are so good at are all over this record. If you liked that last record, they really do iterate on it in a lot of ways, and they pack in everything they can to make this something special. I think what they do a little bit interesting on this record is they pull in some of their thrash and death metal and kind of 80s death metal feeling moments, so that we balance out the death doom with a more dynamic, aggressive approach. So in a lot of ways, you'd think that would sound like an early Incantation record, but it actually sounds like their own thing, and they've added a lot to their oeuvre in the last 10 years, to the point where this is a really high point of mastery for this band, and one that I really appreciate, because they just I feel like they just don't they don't make mistakes on their records. The last two have been just so incredible that I had to put this up here. I think I was a little more enamored with number 1 on the list, but this is something I'm going to continue to listen to for years, just as I did their 2014 record.
The shadows.
I At some point in the last month, a yoga teacher from Boston messaged me on social media and told me that I shouldn't cover icky bands like Inquisition because they did crimes. And I don't know what that has to do with this album at all. I think this is a fantastic record. It is probably one of their better records that brings back some of the sound that they had prior to 2013, and it moves into the sort of aggressive approach of their 2010 record a little bit more, but also produces a lot of effects soaked in psychedelic pieces as well. So there's a lot of very catchy moments. There's sort of surreal things happening all over this record. There's 13 songs, and each of them run about on average like 3 or 4 minutes. So you're not really stuck in one place too long, and it's just there's ideas exploding out of this record from every orifice, and I think that it makes for one of the better Inquisition albums. I think it's kind of surprising because I don't think I'd expected them to really interest me again beyond 2013. But I think this record does a fantastic job of doing that, and has sort of I was still a fan after their 2016 record, but I feel like this pushes a little bit more of my buttons in terms of what I like about Inquisition, and I think a lot of people will be surprised that there's quite a lot of just good stuff on this record.
My goddess, take me to your crown of light. Through your fluid, flood my vessel.
Dipigus is the self-titled third album from Dipigus, which is a death metal band from the Monterey Bay area where they formed, and they've kind of spread out across the country, and they've continued to iterate on their sound over time. And there's a lot to kind of unpack when you talk about this band, because they give this impression of an Autopsy influenced band, but then you start talking about bands like Impetigo and Nuclear Death, and not so much in terms of grindcore, but in horror themed and experimental sounds coming into their work. And then we get into the lyrical themes, and altogether what really matters about this record is that it is recorded a little bit more clearly, and we get to hear some more of the nuance to their sort of growing style. We get to hear the bass guitar very clearly, and everything kind of feeds into this being one of the easiest to read releases by Dipigus, as well as one of the more complete explorations of things like cryptids and war horrors, and I don't know, there's just something kind of off-kilter and interesting about everything they do, which should be this entertaining for death metal, and it's appropriate for death metal when you're playing in an old school death metal themed style. So that isn't necessarily the only reason why this is interesting even. I mean, they've started incorporating analog synths into their sound successfully, and I could go on. There's a lot that they're doing right here and their trajectory, so I really appreciated this record, and I was glad that I got to interview them this month. Resver is the debut full-length album from Command, a Sweden-based heavy metal band who have incorporated a sort of modern dark metal style into their work in a way where we get a little bit of the, I guess they're calling it Swedish metal, and in a lot of ways that makes sense, because they were aiming for classic Swedish heavy metal on in this band early on, and they kind of got a sort of speed metal, darker, kind of almost early Slayer sound on their earlier records under the name Commando, and now they've gotten something that I guess is one part traditional heavy metal and another part like Tribulation or In Solitude. So they're not quite as soft and gothic as that would suggest, but there's still that level of mystery to their work, and they're sort of telling a nightmare of a story here, which is pretty interesting. I felt it was it's up here on here because it was so memorable to me, and because I just sat this thing on repeat for like 4 hours every time I picked it up. So huge fan of this style and the sound, and I wish more people were talking about it. The Caligula's Serenade is the fourth full-length album from Aceris, and this is a band from Daniel Corchado from The Chasm. It is his heavy metal, epic heavy metal, power metal sort of band, and this is, I think, probably one of their better records to date. I really liked their previous record quite a bit, but I think this one does well to show more variety, a little bit more of an over the top personality, while focusing on his signature style of rhythm guitar work, as much as they do harmonized lead guitar solos, and maybe just more varietal cadence from the vocalist in a way that's just impressed me to no end. I think it's a long record. There's a lot to it. It takes some patience compared to the Tertiary Rite, the previous record, but I feel like if you like the last record, you really should get this one, because it feels like it's a sequel to it, like a longer, bigger, better sequel to it, and I really enjoyed it. Lower Form Resistance is the debut full-length album from Dissimulator, and this is a Quebec-based death thrash metal band, or a thrash death metal band, and one that is maybe sort of in the style of a Sadis or a Voivod in most respects. It is a little bit progressive, a little bit technical, very much a classic thrash inspired thing. If you are a fan of Disciples of Power and that kind of thing, I think this is a good option for people who are interested in both classic forms of thrash as well as death thrash, without going full muscle-headed 80s or full-on tech with it. One half of the record is a little bit more atmospheric in its movements, the other half is a little bit more technical, and so it makes for a great listen, basically. To Chemognosis, A Shortcut to Mushrooms, is the debut full-length album from Bor Hammer, a German black metal band, and one that is more of a cross between heavy and black metal, where it is old school black metal in many respects. It is a little bit more of a first wave or late or early second wave style. If you're a fan of Malacarpatan and groups like that, which there are very few of any substance, this kind of feels like that a little bit. Is a little bit more punkish, a little bit more folkish in the way that it produces riffs, but no less related to its storyteller side. And there's a kind of a wild spirit to it, which is both entertaining and just worth talking about. I think not enough people were talking about this record in January, and for me it stood out as something that is as raw and ragged as black metal should be in this style, but also there was plenty of substance, there was plenty of heavy metal style in there, and they basically just kind of pull it together for something that is above average and worth talking about.
Of its burbling along. A dreamlike state of consciousness. Take hold of.
The Rhythmus of Death Eternal is the latest EP from KBNA, a melodic black metal band from Australia, and one that is a solo project from a fellow who is in a bunch of bands. I think he's in Pestilential Shadows, as well as he's just recently joined the fellow who owns this label, Zazen Sounds, his band, Asherontis. And basically, he's a pretty flawless musician here on his own solo project, and most things that he touches are very well practiced, very well performed, and immersive in the sense that he can write just a killer 8-minute melodic black metal song with a huge melodic arc running through it. He can compose for 2 guitars quite well, and all of his work is impressive. Some of it has a little bit more of a classic melodic black metal structure to it. Some of it has more of a Bathory-influenced epic side to it, and this record kind of splits the difference between the first 2 full lengths in some respects. It feels a little bit more serious, a little bit less concerned with the epic side of things, and kind of gets to the tuneful, sort of immersive brunt of it right away, and I really enjoyed that. It was sort of my first serious introduction to the band in most ways, and I was just very impressed. I think it's pretty flawless work overall. Another melodic black metal record that I just couldn't ignore this month was Ecclesia Gnostica from Aatos, and this is a French band with a member of Griffon on the vocals, and a fellow who is a fantastic guitarist driving this project. I think that not only is the art direction very strong for this record, but the album kind of lives up to it with a lot of great dramatic, modern, but also classic feeling melodic black metal songs. And because I've spent so much time listening to melodic black metal for a feature I'm writing, this really stood out as something that is on the modern side of fluidity. It is very emotive and grand in its movement. There's an epic flair to it. There's a lot to enjoy sitting with this record, and I appreciate the meaning they put into this theme as well. This one has grown on me. I'd probably raise the score. If I mention this at the end of the year, I'd probably raise it a little bit. But overall, I think this is a very standout record for January. Reclamation is the latest EP from Portland, Oregon-based black thrash death metal band Thirsting Altar, and this record is it's just 4 songs, so it's fairly short, but they really get to the point and deliver some substance in terms of riffs, very engaging compositions, and plenty of personality, which is it's immediate, and if they can keep up that intensity and just put it into everything they do from this point, I think they'll be an even more notable band in the future, and so I really enjoyed this and wanted to mention it.
Things marching in black, muddling putrid icon, lost of remote control, mind facing horror, nerves exploding, flesh yearning for death.
Satan Soldier of Fortune is the second full-length album from Departure Chandelier, and this is a basically a classic 90s French black metal style band, and one that is from kind of New York and I think Montreal or nearby, and basically they're following up a record that was recorded back in I think 2011 or 2010 with one that was recorded more recently, and they've done their best to replicate the sound of that first record and use a lot of the same synth and keyboard sounds, and maybe reproduce the guitar sound in some effect, but they've left it quite a bit more raw. And in doing so, they've emphasized the more primitive riffs and aggression on this record. So it wasn't my favorite record of the month, but it's still above average and a unique thing that I hope they do more of in the future. The Deepening is the second full-length album from Bdom, and this is a Norwegian black metal band, a post-black metal band, or just a post-metal band if you want to. A very melodic one with a lot of very patiently developed hooks, and just a beautiful soundscape to enjoy here. I think this surprised me. I saw post-metal, I saw post-black metal, and I was ready to turn it off, but I gave this record a chance, and I probably didn't stop listening to it for a couple of weeks. It's a beautiful record, and one that packs enough action into the full listen that it's worth it every time I picked it up, basically. Caverns is the second full-length album from avant-garde death doom or death metal band Meridian out of Chile, and Caverns is a much more mid-paced record. It focuses much more on atmosphere. It incorporates keyboards in a heavier way, and it uses a lot of very simple grooves to get its point across. Probably too simple for a lot of death metal fans who want just an attack overall. But we've lost a little bit of the avant-garde side of the band, the more Portal-influenced side of the band, which picks up later on in the second half of the album. So if you've got the patience, this one develops into something pretty cool as it works through its ideas. In a lot of ways, a band like Null, who are still very young, it feels like maybe a doomer version of Full of Hell, which was already kind of doomer to begin with. It's a aggressive death grind band essentially, with a big variety of ideas to throw around. And the nice thing about it is it doesn't feel like, oh, so random. This is certainly influenced by Portal. It certainly touches upon a lot of the Full of Hell style soundscapes and aggression, the raw aggression and the experimental noise and all that. But they go somewhere with it. And I think this is a far more serious record than their previous one. I think there's some different folks involved this time, and I think they've done a fine job of following up their pretty exciting previous record with something that feels a little bit more stoic and profound in, whatever way that you can see fit. I had a great time listening to it. Summoning Ancient Bleakness is the debut full-length album from Spanish black metal project Dolorosa. This is a solo project as far as I understand. It features the main guy behind Gawa, and it is very much, you can tell from the title, it's very much aiming for a classic black metal sound, heavily influenced by mayhem and dissection. That doesn't mean that it's entirely straightforward, that it is consonant in every respect, but that it frays the edges a little bit like a mayhem record would, and that makes for a uncomplicated and impressive guitar album that is just kind of cool. I enjoyed this record front to back, and the vocalist is just over the top enough to be entertaining, while the more referential side of the guitar work is never bothersome. It's pretty entertaining. A Pale Crown is the sixth full-length album from Narboleth, a project that was originally based out of Cuba and eventually moved to the Galicia region in Spain. This band have done a great job of incorporating melody and classic sounds. They're heavily influenced by bands like Satyricon and have refined their guitar work to a point where that is a strong representation of their sound. I really was attracted to this for its aggression and its strong grasp of melodic guitar work. And I think that this is an easy recommendation for anyone who just generally loves black metal that is driven by guitar work and a classic sound to it. The appeal of Master of Stone, the latest full-length album from Ancient Bdom, is basically that they've gone a little bit more stoner rock or doom on this latest record. It is their heaviest record to date, but they are still writing catchy, kind of poppy songs that are about the devil, and it's a great time. It's a catchy album. There's no real flops on here, and I think that it's a very distinct vocalist who writes engaging melodies that are simple but effective, and that's a pretty easy thing to enjoy.
It's beginning to look like the world's demise. There will come a time.
Dreadful Seizures is a sophomore full-length album from Aidic Grave, a death metal band who really stick to the classic sounds, an uglier sort of demo-level sound that you'll appreciate if you're a fan of Abhorrence and classic Finnish and United States death metal. They've leaned into some of the simpler early Cannibal Corpse feeling sounds on this record, and they've switched drummers, so it's a little bit more of a different sound overall, and one that I think is a general improvement in dynamics and production values beyond the first. And they're still keeping it old school, which is admirable. It's a great sounding record and just solid overall. Sinister Upheaval is the debut full-length album from Boundless Chaos. This is a German death thrash death metal band with gruff vocals. It is much more on the thrash metal side of things, and if you appreciate that a bit more, this is a good balance between the early very aggressive side of German thrash metal, Creator, Sodom, and all that, but not quite witching metal. This is much more death metal focused. Classic sound, great production values, and overall a band with a lot of personality that maybe needs to focus more on the songwriting aspect of it, make it a little bit more memorable, and I think they'll have it in the bag at that point. This is a great debut and one that made a strong impact. It's a name I'll remember for next time. And to end out January, instead of any honorable mentions, we'll go right to mentioning that I have released the digital version of Mystification Zine 2, that is issue 2 Altered Visions. That is available on our Patreon. You can click on the banner here on the site, and you can purchase a copy of it, or you can become a member, and I'll email you a copy within 24 hours. So check that out. It helps to support the site and keep me going and doing all that, and it's a lot of fun to put together, so I hope a lot of people get into it.